Imagine this. You wake up tomorrow with no structure, no plan, and no one forcing you to do anything. No boss, no schedule, no alarms, just freedom. And yet, by the end of the day, you've accomplished nothing. Not because you didn't want to, but because the hours slipped through your fingers. A few emails, a few scrolls, a few snacks, a few "I'll do it later" decisions. And just like that, it's gone. Now imagine this is every day. Because for most people, it is. They aren't lazy, they aren't unmotivated, they're just undisciplined. And discipline isn't about waking up at 5 a.m. or putting motivational quotes on your wall. It's not about planners or productivity hacks or morning routines copied from billionaires. It's about something much deeper and far more uncomfortable. You see, most people treat discipline like a gym membership, optional, intermittent, based on mood, motivation, or how tired they are. But discipline, real discipline, is not a feeling. It's a structure. It's not about how you feel, it's about who you refuse to be. And the truth is, if you don't have a system governing your behavior, you're being governed. By what? By impulses, by moods, by distractions, by fear, by fatigue, by comfort. You are never neutral. Right now, whether you realize it or not, your life is being built by patterns. Some of them you chose. Most of them you didn't. And here's the paradox. The more free your day feels, the more trapped you actually become. Because freedom without structure creates chaos. And chaos doesn't lead to progress. It leads to decay. You've probably felt it before. That quiet panic around 6 p.m. when you realize the day is almost over and you haven't done the one thing that mattered, the one thing you promised yourself you'd do again, and you tell yourself, tomorrow will be different, but it won't, not unless you do something radical. Because here's the truth, no one wants to say out loud. Most people are addicted to softness. Not comfort, softness, the path of least resistance. The option that costs less in the short term, but destroys you in the long term. It starts as just 10 more minutes of sleep and ends as a life you don't respect. Machiavelli understood this. He didn't speak about motivation. He didn't care about feelings. He wrote about order, structure, power, and survival. He understood that the man who cannot discipline himself will be disciplined by the world. That without internal command, you will be owned by every external pressure, every craving, every distraction, every opinion. Discipline is not about being hard on yourself. It's about not lying to yourself anymore. Because here's what most people don't realize. Every time you break your own word, every time you say, I'll do it, and you don't, a part of you stops trusting yourself. And when that happens enough times, you don't just lose time, you lose power, you lose integrity, you lose the very force that moves you toward anything meaningful. Let me ask you something. How many promises have you made to yourself this year? How many of those have you actually kept? And how many of those broken promises have quietly convinced you that maybe you're just not that disciplined of a person? But what if the problem isn't you? What if the problem is that you were taught the wrong idea of discipline from the start? What if discipline has nothing to do with willpower and everything to do with governance? Because that's what Machiavelli was trying to show us. That real power, the kind that builds empires and transforms lives, doesn't come from bursts of motivation. It comes from building a system so strong that even your weakest day can't break it. And here's the deeper question. If you don't lead your mind like a commander, who is? That's where we're going next. Let's look at the root of why your mind resists discipline and why most people are quietly at war with themselves before the day even begins. You weren't born undisciplined, you were trained into it. You were trained into emotional dependency, into reaction over reflection, into seeking permission instead of taking direction. And worst of all, you were trained to associate discipline with punishment, not power. Somewhere along the line, doing what's hard became a sign of failure, not strength. The phrase, "you just need more discipline," started sounding like blame, like something's wrong with you, like you're weak. But here's the truth. Discipline is not about moral superiority, it's about psychological freedom. And without it, you're not living, you're performing. For everyone. For your boss, your family, social media, the algorithm, the culture. You become obedient to 1,000 outside voices, but defiant toward your own. Let's go deeper. Carl Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The same applies to discipline. Until you make your automatic behaviors visible, your avoidance, your rationalizations, your self-betrayals, they will run your life in the background, and you will mistake your comfort for peace. But comfort is not peace. Comfort is often the camouflage of decay. Nietzsche said, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." Think about that. It's not about being under someone else's rule. It's about the quiet inability to follow your own direction, to commit, to stay, to finish. Not because someone is watching, but because you said you would. The undisciplined life is governed by emotion, and emotion, when unexamined, is chaos. You feel tired, so you stop. You feel bored, so you scroll. You feel overwhelmed, so you avoid. But what you don't see is that each of those micro decisions is a vote for who you are becoming. And the problem is, identity follows behavior, not the other way around. You keep telling yourself, when I become more confident, more organized, more clear, then I'll be disciplined. But Machiavelli would say, no, you don't wait to feel powerful. You create structure so you become powerful. You shape your days like a strategist shapes a battlefield, with intention, with clarity, and without asking for permission. But the modern mind resists this, not because it's lazy, but because it's fragmented. You've been conditioned to believe you are one person, but in reality, you're a parliament of competing voices. There's a part of you that wants to wake up early, and a part that wants to stay in bed, a part of you that wants to start, and a part that fears failure, a part that wants change, and another part that only feels safe in repetition. This is where internal family systems, IFS, psychology becomes useful. IFS teaches that we are made of parts, inner personalities, shaped by past experience, and many of these parts are protective. They block discipline not because they want to sabotage you, but because they don't trust you. They remember the shame of past failure, the rejection, the exhaustion. They learned that doing less felt safer than trying and being humiliated. So what happens? You set a goal, you get excited, you feel motivated, and then resistance. Procrastination shows up, or self-doubt, or some urgent distraction that just has to be handled first. And you believe it. You tell yourself, I just need to rest. I need to feel better first. And just like that, you hand over your power to the very part of you that was trained to protect you through avoidance. Here's the Machiavellian twist. Those parts must be led, not ignored, not punished. Led. Machiavelli didn't believe in waiting for the right conditions. He believed in control, in calculated direction, in creating outcomes through foresight and force, not chance. Discipline, then, is not about fighting your resistance, it's about governing it, like a ruler governs a volatile province. You can't always trust your emotional state, but you can lead it. You can name the parts that resist, listen to them, and then choose action anyway, because you are the one in command. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of unimaginable suffering, once said, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose. That space is where discipline is born, not in doing what you feel like doing, but in becoming the kind of person who decides anyway." So ask yourself, do you recognize the part of you that avoids structure, that craves spontaneity, ease, or comfort? Do you notice how quickly your energy shifts the moment something feels difficult? And what do you tell yourself when that happens? If you listen closely, you'll hear it. The inherited voices, the narratives, the conditioning that shaped your definition of effort and work and enough. They're not yours, but they're running your day. This is why Machiavelli matters here. Because he didn't write for the idealized man. He wrote for the real one, conflicted, tempted, selfish, strategic, powerful. And his central insight was this: if you do not shape your environment will shape you. The modern environment is anti-discipline, notifications, algorithms, endless options, instant dopamine. Your brain is being hijacked, and you think it's a personality flaw. It's not. It's a lack of inner leadership. And discipline is how you take the crown back. So before we move on, let's make one thing clear. You are not weak, you are untrained, you are not broken, you are ungoverned. But that can change, because now you know the real enemy isn't laziness, it's fragmentation, it's external rule, it's the absence of conscious command. And the moment you understand that, the moment you truly see how you've been unconsciously owned by the world around you, you're ready to rebel. Let's talk about that next. So what happens when you live undisciplined? Not just in your habits, but in your mind. Most people think the cost is obvious. Missed goals, unfinished projects, unused gym memberships. But those are surface level symptoms. The deeper cost is far more invisible and far more dangerous. It's identity erosion. You begin to lose the thread of who you are, not because someone took it, but because day after day you handed it away, 5 minutes at a time, 10 scrolls at a time, 100 small avoidances that quietly shaped the story you tell yourself about yourself. And that story gets dangerous fast, because when your behavior is inconsistent with your intention, you stop trusting yourself. At first, it's subtle. You say you're going to wake up early, but you don't. You say you'll finish the project, but it gets pushed again. You say this week will be different, but by Friday, it's the same. And your subconscious records every one of those moments. It builds a psychological ledger, not to punish you, but to protect you, because from your brain's perspective, repeated failure becomes a threat to your sense of safety. So what does it do? It lowers your expectations. It numbs your ambition. It mutes your inner voice, the one that dares to want more. That's not laziness, that's learned helplessness, and it's a survival mechanism. When you experience repeated internal betrayal, setting a standard, then breaking it, your mind begins to believe that trying is dangerous, because effort in your history has been paired with disappointment. Eventually, you stop trusting your own word. And if you can't trust your word, you can't trust your will. And if you can't trust your will, someone else will, because that's how the world works. The undisciplined don't live in freedom. They live in submission, not to a tyrant, but to every little external pressure that whispers, just do this instead. It's easier. Without inner command, the outer world becomes your ruler. You wake up, and the first thing you check is someone else's agenda, email, social, messages. You go through your day, reacting to noise, not executing on strategy. And by the time night comes, you're not tired from creation. You're drained from reaction. This isn't just inefficient, it's soul damaging, because deep down, you know you were meant for more than this. Not more success, not more applause, but more sovereignty. The right to own your time, your energy, your direction. Every time you scroll instead of study, every time you put it off instead of push through, every time you break your own structure because it doesn't feel right today, you're not just delaying progress, you're reinforcing powerlessness. And here's the worst part. Eventually, that powerlessness starts to look like your personality. You stop saying, I didn't do the thing. You start saying, I'm just not that type of person. Not disciplined, not focused, not driven. That's the lie. You're not lacking those qualities. You're just running a pattern of disorganization that's been rewarded more often than it's been punished. Let's make it clear, the modern world is engineered for disorder. Short-term pleasure is rewarded instantly. Long-term focus is punished with boredom. So if you don't install internal consequences, the world will give you none. And without consequences, behavior doesn't change. This is why Machiavelli spoke so often about fear, not as terror, but as leverage. He knew that people move only when stakes are real. In his words, it is much safer to be feared than loved if one must choose. Apply this inwardly. If your own mind doesn't fear the cost of betrayal, it will keep choosing ease over effort, emotion over structure, comfort over command. This is not a moral failure. It's a leadership vacuum. Discipline isn't about self-punishment, it's about restoring internal authority. And without it, you'll keep outsourcing your identity to feedback loops that don't care if you grow. You'll keep being shaped by whatever's loudest, most urgent, or most pleasurable. This is how people lose years of their life, without even realizing it. Not because they were incapable, but because they were available to every distraction, demand, and dopamine hit that called their name. You don't need more time. You need fewer exits. You don't need more motivation. You need rules that matter, ones you refuse to break. Because here's what no one tells you. When you don't build discipline, life builds it for you. Through crisis. The health scare that forces a lifestyle change. The financial collapse that forces new spending habits. The broken relationship that exposes all the emotional habits you ignored. If you don't choose structure, eventually pain will enforce it. So you have a choice. Build your own consequences, or wait for life to build them for you. This is the turning point. You are either being shaped by default or by design, and the gap between who you are and who you could be is made up of thousands of small decisions where you either surrender to chaos or stand like a sovereign over your own day. So ask yourself, what structures have you refused to build? Where have you made your own word optional? Where have you allowed how I feel to outrank what I said I'd do? Because that's the real discipline test. Not when it's easy, but when you want to quit, when the results aren't fast, when no one is watching. That's where most people fold, but that's where we go next. Into the rebellion, the part where you learn how to break this cycle, not with inspiration, but with precision. This is the part where most people ask, so how do I fix it? What do I do? But Machiavelli wouldn't ask that. He'd ask a better question. What have you tolerated for too long? Because you don't build discipline by doing more, you build it by removing what weakens you. Not tomorrow, not after you feel ready, but now. The first rebellion isn't motivational, it's structural. You don't need another inspiring speech. You need an environment that makes betrayal impossible, or at least expensive. So here's your rebellion, broken down in 3 moves. 1. Declare war on optionality. The modern world is a buffet of choices. Unlimited entertainment, unlimited opinions, unlimited exit doors from anything uncomfortable. That's the problem. Discipline dies in abundance. You're not overwhelmed because you have too much to do. You're overwhelmed because you have too many choices, and you've never stripped them down to the non-negotiables. So the first step is this: create fixed rules that you don't debate with your emotions. Rules that define who you are, not how you feel. I don't eat after 8 p.m. I wake up and go for a 10-minute walk before checking my phone. I write 300 words a day, no matter what. Not because they're magical, but because they are identity anchors, visible proof to yourself that you are in command. The rebellion begins when you stop using your mood as a reason to break your own word. 2. Assign consequences. The brain doesn't change behavior based on intention. It changes based on consequence. Yet most of your personal commitments have no teeth. You skip a workout, nothing happens. You break your diet, who's holding you accountable? This is where most personal development fails. Machiavelli would call it amateur rule, because in his world, a prince who issued laws without punishment was not respected. He was mocked, overthrown. Apply this to your own mind. If there are no consequences for breaking your code, then you don't have a code, you have a wish list. So set one consequence for one rule. If you miss the habit, you owe $50 to a cause you hate. If you scroll past your bedtime, you delete the app for 3 days. If you miss your morning routine, you take a cold shower as penance. This isn't punishment, it's psychological leverage. It trains your mind to associate short-term escape with long-term cost. And eventually it learns breaking the rule is more painful than keeping it. That's how habit gets hardwired. 3. Build a fortress, not a schedule. Most people try to fix discipline with a calendar, but a schedule is a weak defense. It assumes the world won't interrupt. A fortress, on the other hand, anticipates attack. It's proactive, not reactive. Here's what a fortress looks like. Your phone sleeps in another room. You don't decide what to eat every day. You meal prep like a strategist. You use blockers to prevent late-night browsing. You set recurring reminders not to do more, but to return to your system. In other words, you build a life where the default behavior is aligned with your goals. You don't rely on discipline as a feeling. You design your environment to make the right decision inevitable. That's real discipline, not willpower, but design plus consequence plus repetition. And the best part? Once the system is built, the emotional effort drops. Because your brain starts recognizing the pattern. This is who we are now. Discipline stops being a battle. It becomes a reputation with yourself. You stop negotiating. You stop looking for hacks. You just live inside the code. And that's when something strange happens. The world starts treating you differently. People respect your time without you asking. Distractions become less tempting. Chaos starts organizing itself around your clarity because you've stopped broadcasting chaos. You've become predictable to yourself. And that's what Machiavelli understood better than most. Power isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling the signals you send into the world. And when you become known to yourself and to others as someone with inner command, the world starts to bend around you. But it starts small, with rules no one else sees, with battles no one else knows you're fighting, and victories no one else will ever clap for. That's why most people never build real discipline, because it doesn't come with applause, it comes with silence. But in that silence, something stronger grows, a mind that doesn't flinch when it's time to act, a nervous system that doesn't collapse when it's time to lead, a life where you don't wonder what to do next, because your code already decided for you. This is the rebellion. You stop being a servant to your feelings and become the ruler of your time, energy, and identity. And if that sounds extreme, good, because mediocrity isn't destroyed by mild advice. It's dismantled by radical clarity and unshakable action. You want to master discipline? Stop asking how to get motivated. Start asking how to become non-negotiable. Your rules aren't just about behavior. They're about becoming the kind of person you no longer need to fix. And the final step? You'll find it in the last section, where we stop playing defense and start rewriting your entire relationship with identity, ambition, and authority. You're almost there. Let me know when you're ready for. Here's what no one tells you about discipline. It's not the goal, it's not the destination, it's the initiation. Because once you master it, something even more powerful begins to awaken in you, something Machiavelli hinted at but rarely said directly. Discipline is the gateway drug to sovereignty. Once you stop negotiating with your emotions, once you start making moves before you feel ready, once your identity is defined by your own code, not your cravings, you no longer just have discipline, you have power. And this kind of power terrifies people, because now you're not just consistent, you're unpredictable. You're not waiting to be told who to be, you're designing it. You're no longer seduced by comfort or approval. You're guided by something older, something harder, something regal. You've become, in Machiavelli's terms, a prince of your own mind. And here's the final truth. Discipline is not about control, it's about command. Control is insecure, it's reactive, it's based on fear, trying to hold everything together so nothing breaks. Command is different. Command is what happens when you've trained your body, your emotions, your patterns to obey your deeper truth, not your panic, not your urges, not your weakness. And the greatest form of command, predictability to yourself. This is what Machiavelli revered more than brilliance or charm or even strength. A person who cannot be swayed by mood, whose actions follow a known code, is more powerful than armies, because this person can be trusted, not by others, but by their future self. When chaos hits, they don't ask what to do. They already know. They trained for it, they rehearsed it in silence. This person doesn't hope for consistency, they've made it inevitable through structure. This person doesn't dream of a better future, they build it in hourly increments. And slowly, the world begins to treat them differently. Not because they asked, because the world, like a wild horse, responds not to force, but to certainty. And you have become certain, not arrogant, not loud, just unmistakably, quietly unshakable, because you did what most people never will. You stopped waiting to feel like it. You stopped needing inspiration. You stopped chasing emotional permission. You became your own source of motion. This is where discipline ends and authority begins. And that's what changes everything, because now you don't just wake up early, you don't just write every day, you don't just follow through. Now you shape reality. You say no and mean it. You commit and keep it. You suffer and still act. You've become trustworthy, not in public but in private. You no longer need punishment. You no longer need permission. You are self-governing. And this is the secret all the productivity gurus and motivational speakers never say. The goal of discipline is not results, it's rulership. Discipline isn't about getting everything you want. It's about proving to yourself that nothing owns you. Not your phone, not your fatigue, not your doubt, not your pain. You own yourself. That is the ultimate power. And when you reach this level, you'll notice something strange. The chaos quiets. The temptations shrink, the world softens. Why? Because you no longer attract struggle the same way. You've become incompatible with disorder. You don't need drama to feel alive. You don't need approval to feel worthy. You don't need comfort to keep going. You are powered by something deeper, your word. You say it, you do it. And if you fail, you adjust. You re-enter the system, not with guilt, but with resolve, because discipline doesn't make you perfect, it makes you undeniable. And once you're undeniable to yourself, everything changes. Choose one rule, one non-negotiable, one law you will live by, starting now. Write it down, declare it publicly, honor it in private, not because it's magical, but because this one act will begin the rewiring process, not just of your habits, but of your identity. And that, more than any goal, any milestone, any success, is the real victory. You didn't just master discipline, you became someone who no longer needs to be saved. The fortress is built, the war is over, the crown is yours. Now wear it like you earned it, because you did.